Today we will be talking about deal killers. This is very important for you guys to learn. A great subject. I think you definitely want to learn, master. And I think this goes more than beyond just as we were talking about business. This goes to real estate and the business aspect of it. Well, or things that can kill your deal. All right. Seth and I have spent some good time graciously coming up with these ideas and fine tuning them for this evening. So without further ado,
Absolutely.
people in. Breaking news. Okay. And this is a great kind of topic that ties into what we're going to be speaking today about deal killers. Home equity is a near record high. Tapping into it may be tricky due to high interest rates. Average equity per borrower increased by 28,000 to about 305,000 total. That's a lot of equity that's trapped, right? And I want everybody to think about this in a facet of you can't really refinance, right? Unless you have to, which usually would make sense, you can't really refinance. So all that money that's stuck, it's kind of just stuck. It makes no sense for most people to refinance. I know I have a less than 3% interest rate on my house, right? I have properties with a 4%, 4.5% interest rate. Those are locked in for 30 years. It makes no sense whatsoever to refinance. I could get 4%, 5% from a T-bill, from a high yield savings account. Those are the things you want to consider as you're investing, like how hard your money is working for you. And we say this a lot during the coursework and stuff like that. The cash on cash return. How hard is your money going to be working for you? So at 2%, it's almost considered like free money. You won't find 2%. I don't know. You might get like private money, some silly person doing private money at 2%, but you will not find 2% pretty much anywhere in this market. Even I had it today, but I guess I tossed it. Even like lines of credit, their rate is about 3 to 4% on a line of credit, right? So 2%, 3%, 4s, those are tough to find nowadays. Seth, anything you want to share about this?
Yeah, I mean, it goes into the pent up buying power and also the pent up selling power, right? And we talked, I think it was last week or the week before, one of the biggest issues, not getting political, but one of the biggest issues for people in this upcoming election in the United States has to do with housing and the affordability of it and things like that, right? So buyers need the affordability. Sellers have all this trapped money, right? These are sellers, people that have that money in there. Yeah, you could refinance, but it's also, you found it a lot in the post-COVID time where people were learning that you could go virtual like we are here today, right? But you can work a full-time job virtually now. So why have a house close to New York City when you could be in a rural community with 20 acres and have a bigger house and pay for it with cash with all your equity? And a lot of people did that and moved out of the big cities into the rural areas. There's still all this untapped market here. People can do the exact same thing. If rates do go the way that the Fed is predicting, it's going to be a perfect storm. And when we were saying that before, we were like, man, this 22% appreciation in less than a year because of everything that's happened with rates and these things, like it's a bubble that everything's going to crash. It hasn't. Home equity is near a record high. The reason why is because home prices are at a record high.
Yeah.
So,
and I think, as you mentioned too, this is like a generational shift, right? If I know Peter Maryland just sold their business, a lot of people are retiring or have retired. This is a great time. This would be a great time to get out. All that work that you've done, it's a great time to sell. For your new investors, when you look at invest, we play in a whole different game. We got to play it for the long game. We got to play it for the 20, 30-year game. All right. The days of making easy money and cash out refi, it's tough. Right? It's tough. You have to really have the experience to know how to do it. And that's why we're here. That's what we're going to talk about today, the things that kill deals. So without further ado, Seth, if you want to go to the next slide, I want y'all to write these down, take a picture, take a screenshot. Don't care what you do. But these are the top deal killers. These are the things that you want to be cautious of. You want to walk away from if you see it. If you hear about it, remember, we analyze not off emotion, but we analyze based on numbers. It's all numbers. So these are the concepts that I want you to think about when you are dealing with new deals. Okay. And Seth and I'll kind of dig deeper into some of the ones that we think are like some of the most important and prevalent in today's market.
Yeah.
But we'll kind of glance over these. One is going to be funding. Money's not cheap right now, right? Interest rates, you can't really refinance. Banks are getting tighter, right? I mean, before it was 80%, they'll loan on 80%, you put up 20%. Some commercial deals, it might be 25. I've seen commercial deals where they want you to put down 35, even 40%, right? So funding is a big part of it.
So a speaker we had on very early in this group, Lindy Pond, I know her very well and still follow her and stuff like that. She actually was doing another speaking event, and I was able to tune into it. But she was talking about a lender that she works very closely with has just moved her or moved their seasoning period up to 12 months. It used to be 90 days seasoning, then it went to 6 months. Now it's going to 12 months. It's just showing that it's not just rates that are high that make it less affordable and stuff like that. It's also the restrictions and the guidelines that these banks and these underwriters are going under is tightening up.
And
Can you just explain what's seasoning? I just want to follow what you're saying. What's seasoning?
So seasoning is how long you've owned a property before you can refinance or do some other type of loan. So sometimes it has to be rented for that season period. Sometimes you just have to be on title for that season period. But when banks look at for like a DSCR, a debt service coverage ratio loan, or any type of refinance, they look at the seasoning period, basically how long that property's been owned.
Yeah. Next would be I want to jump to contingencies, right? And again, remember I said buy with numbers base and contingencies, and we can put well, let's just go to contingencies. I don't want to jump around because a lot of these are kind of intertwined. I want you to understand that a lot of this stuff kind of is intertwined. Contingencies, if you remember, people were bidding up properties and they were waiving contingencies, right? You do not want to be one of those people. It gets very tricky. You go buy a property with no inspection contingency. Everybody knows I'm not a fan of that. Get a sewer scope. Make sure that you are, doing all your due diligence. Some people were buying property sight unseen, 50,000 over asking, 100,000 over asking, with no contingency. They were just going to pay for it. That was it. And unfortunately, you don't hear a lot of the stories about the people who got, beat upside their head because they took that loss, right? They bought something that had a bad foundation. If they would have had an inspection, they would have caught that. Mold issues, pest issues, walking into something with contingencies is a protection for you as a buyer and as an investor, right? So, waiving those contingencies, I'm never a big fan of. I actually walked away from what was a great property because somebody else outbid me, or they actually put the same bid, but they waived the contingencies. The realtor said, "Hey, Ray, do you want to bounce back and waive your contingencies?" Absolutely not. I'll walk. All right. You're going to go in blindsided. You're going to have no idea what you're getting into, and it could cost a lot more just because, you might be anxious or the money's burning a hole in your pocket. Make sure you do your due diligence.
And also when you're dealing with off-market properties and stuff like that, as a lot of investors deal with, you're dealing directly with the seller, or if you're, I do a lot of wholesaling in my business, so I also deal directly with the buyer. It can come from both angles too, right? We just had a seller come back with, we offered them $61,000 cash with a 35-day close or something like that. What our typical contract was, and he came back with a counter, and it was $62,000. But then it also had strike this from the contract, add this to the contract, change this date to this, and just adding these contingencies and stuff like that. And for me, that's a deal killer. That's where we need to go back in. We need to renegotiate so that we have terms that are favorable for us to profit on this deal. Same thing on buyer's side. I've had buyers in the past that have said, I have to close with my attorney. I have to do the closing with that. And when you're wholesaling, it's very key that one person handles the transaction, both sides, for you. And it just was not going to work in that particular situation. That contingency right there is what killed that deal. He said he wouldn't do it. And I said, that's fine. We'll find a different buyer. And we did.
Yeah. Next, appraisals, making sure the property appraises. A bad appraisal will kill a deal. 100% bad appraisal will kill a deal. And that'll be a tool you can use to negotiate as well. Okay. Inspections, 100%. I always tell you guys, get an inspection. That could be a deal killer, but it can also be a deal saver. Okay. An inspection is, look at it as a negotiation tool for when you go to your seller or your buyer and say, hey, this is where I'm at right now. These are the things that need fixed. Will you negotiate? If not, walk away. Right? If the numbers don't make sense after it, walk away. Leave it.
Also, if anybody's looking on the flip side of things where you're going to be fixing and flipping and stuff like that, you got to take into account appraisals and inspections as you as the investor when you go to sell this property as well. Ray and I are about to start a project that we're planning on doing a flip, and I've done quite a few. And honestly, you know, when you have your budget coming in, you always go over budget and over timeline. Like it never happens the way that you planned. And that's fine once you realize what you're doing and things like that. But more importantly, contractors, especially, they'll go in there and they'll want to cut a corner here. They'll want to do something this way and that way. Understand that you may think that you're going to get top dollar for a property, but if it's not going to appraise in this market, you're definitely not going to get what you're thinking that you're going to get. And if it doesn't inspect, it can affect your buyer's funding. They can use that as negotiations for you. So it's super important as the seller on flip properties to be cautious of these as well.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that on that project. When Seth and I toured the project, we're teaming up on a project. When we toured that project, we almost went through it as if we were the inspector. We are looking as the inspector would for the things that the inspector would catch, because the number one thing that happens when an inspector catches something, your price goes down. You're either going to fix it or they're going to negotiate on a price.
And right? I know my exit strategy for that is a flip. So my end buyer is going to be a retail buyer that's going to have retail funding, which means that they're going to have an inspection required to make that loan happen. So I know that an inspector's coming in. So I need to key on what is my inspector going to catch so that I can keep him happy so the buyer doesn't get scared away and wants to pay the price that Ray and I want to get for this property.
Yep, 100%. Title issues, another issue that could pop up, a big one. Clouds on title. You could have could be in probate. Is that correct, Seth? You could have a title that's in probate. You could there could be encumbrances on a property that could be found. Liens, tax liens can be found on title. And if the person prior or who has it doesn't want to clear it up, that's a deal killer for me. We might have to walk. If you won't renegotiate, I'll walk on it. Another thing is zoning and HOAs. Now, you guys all know I'm not a fan of buying in the HOA. And to my people in Canada, I know you buy condos. Is the big thing in Canada is buying condos, and you got to pay maintenance fees. All that does is eat away at your cash flow. You really don't control the property, because guess what? All of a sudden they want maintenance fees to go up because they want to put a new roof or they want to change the color of you really don't control the property. So HOAs, HOA fees, restrictions. There are times that I've heard of HOAs putting a lien on a property.
100%.
Right?
Happens
Just
all the
because
time.
of HOA fee, or you failed to do something and they fined you. HOA fines. Zoning issues, big one, making sure that the property is properly zoned. And I've seen a lot. There might be a duplex, but it's a single family zone. That might not fly. Some people have put on additions, right? It might not fly. So making sure that the property is properly zoned is a big one.
It's funny. I've ran across, in the past 3 months, we've ran across 4 deals where the zoning isn't what actually sits there. I think we talked about it either in the Wednesday call or maybe it was one of these. We had it was a single family, it's zoned a single family, but it had 2 kitchens, and the seller is selling it as he's actually the one that was asking for a bunch of contingencies as well, but he's selling it as a duplex. You got to run our numbers as a single family, and zoned as a single family. I'm working on a deal just across the border in Pennsylvania that is a 5-unit building. It's got 5 addresses. It's got 4 electric meters. I think it's got 2 or 3 water meters. I mean, it's a mess of a project, but it'll be fun. And it's 5 potential income streams there for it. But it's zoned as a triplex. And that's a sticking point for me. I told the owner that I need it zoned properly, or I need, certified letters saying that I'm able to operate it as it's currently sitting and not how it's zoned. Because when this title changes, when all these things happen, when you actually buy the deal, that's when these zoning issues, these title issues, these different things start coming back to you, right? The county may think, it doesn't matter. That house is just kind of sitting there. As soon as paperwork comes in for that house,
yep, it's over.
Flag happens, and it's your problem then because you closed.
And I'll share with you, I bought a 4-unit building that I had to transition into a 2-unit, right? I knew what I was getting into, but if I had underwrote that deal for a 4-unit, I'd be upside down, right? But luckily we underwrote it for a 2-unit because we knew it had zoning issues. But for somebody who was inexperienced, it would have cost them. It would have cost them big time.